Welcome to Beyond Names. I'm Dr. Habib. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition and those who are not sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine Allah, Yahweh, Elohim, Brahman, Great Spirit, mystery, higher power, or you're still searching for language that fits, you are welcome here. Together, we will explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways that we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with an introduction to this episode's conversation partner. Dr. Dana Maxwell is a family medicine doctor who works in a rural community in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains area. If you want to reach out to Dr. Dana after this episode and hearing the insights that she has to share, her IG handle is at the THE underscore DIY underscore doc. Um, and that IG handle fits that you also do these retreats tell us a little bit about the DIY.
Well, there's a whole story behind that. But yeah, I do retreats on the weekends, and the slogan for that is DIY a life you love. And the DIY part actually started because I'm renovating the house that I'm sitting in right now. And so, but then all things kind of came from that and fell into place. And so it's these retreats that I lead that kind of bring in all parts of my life that are outside of medicine, but also include some medicine. So hiking, yoga, I'm a yoga teacher, integrative wellness. I used to do integrative health coaching before medicine, wilderness medicine, because now I'm involved in the wilderness medicine world as well. So yeah, one of my
Great,
passions.
great, great.
Yeah.
So thank you for telling us a little bit about the DIY. Now, if you would tell us more about your spiritual journey, just as a way of giving us the opportunity to get to know who you are.
Yeah. So I grew up in an agnostic household. So my parents always just kind of said, hey, if you want to explore any kind of religion, we'll support you in that, which I really appreciated. There was always an open conversation about it. They always encouraged us to believe in something bigger than ourselves, but there was never really language or definition about what that was.
Mhm.
And so we ended up living in a Christian community for a large part of my childhood.
Mhm.
But we did not attend church, and so that wasn't really a part of my childhood. And then through my own journey with yoga and just life, I've explored little bits of different religions, some Sufism with you when I was living in Austin, Texas, and just dabbled in different things throughout my life. But currently, I would say I'm still kind of on my own journey, searching, trying to define language, and really open to whatever seems to fit when that comes my way. Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
great. So, and I'm curious because we went through, maybe it's just because it's on my mind that we met through yoga teacher training however many years ago.
Yeah.
Wondering if the yoga, there's Sprout.
Yes. Fantastic.
I'm wondering if the yoga is a part of your spirituality. I'm especially interested in these intersections. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people, of course, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but of course, in the United States, a lot of people think of yoga more as a body practice
Mhm.
without necessarily the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita or any of those other spiritual texts or sacred texts that are associated with Hinduism. Um, how has that played out for you? Have you experienced the intersection of spirituality and yoga as a yoga teacher? And
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, especially so back in Austin. So I did my first teacher training when I met you when I was 18, which was more than a year ago. So
Two
uh,
years.
yeah, 2 years ago. So So yeah, so I did my first yoga teacher training with what was it called, Yoga in Austin. And I would say at that point, I was really starting to kind of, well, a lot of our text was, reading, different books, the Bhagavad Gita. We had all the required, readings. And so at that point, I was definitely exploring things a little bit more. And then especially I did my Kundalini yoga teacher training, I think when I was 19, like a year after I finished the Hatha training. Um, and so definitely it has influenced my own spiritual practice. I would say it's not necessarily like what I go to and follow, strictly in terms of um, any one thing, but it definitely has impacted me. And I do see yoga as a form of my spiritual practice.
Mm,
Because for me, moving my body, slowing things down, being outside, all of that to me brings me back to my own source, whatever you might want to call it. Um, so definitely there's parts of that that have kind of stuck with me, but nothing that I would say in particular in terms of following anything strictly.
mhm. Okay. So I want to, of course, remember what you said. Moving your body,
Yes.
uh, slowing things down,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say you didn't. This is not exactly how you language of it. To bring together your language and my language, be like returning to the still center. Uh,
Yes.
that these are all things that you found are intersections of spirituality and your yoga practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Um, And since we talked about the DIY stuff, and I
Yeah.
know that so much of that is not the life you love, maybe more than the DIY is about being in nature
Mhm.
and even like where you chose to live is, it's about connection. If I may presume to
Yeah.
that, I'm drawing a conclusion there, but I mean, so can you speak to how you experience the intersection of, well, first, can you just tell us what spirituality means to you? And then speak to the intersection of spirituality and nature.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just know that the hiking and the mountains and all of that is such an important part of your life. So
Yeah. So I guess spirituality for me is kind of like what I said, it was anything to me that brings me back to source, oneness. Um, and it's been something that even when I was a kid, I remember going out in the woods. I lived in Connecticut in the I guess hills of Connecticut. And I would just go out into the woods with at that time with some yoga literature and like journals and read. And I remember I think I was probably like 15 sitting out on a rock and thinking like, this is, I feel whole right now. Something feels different.
mhm,
And not really having, like I said, language has always been a hard thing for me. And being able to put it into words, but I felt really whole and at peace. And something about that moment, speaking about it now at 38, really sat with me.
mhm,
And um, and so to this day, I would say that I see spirituality as anything that brings, I'll speak for myself, brings me back to my center,
mhm,
and grounds me. And I think also it usually brings in guiding principles. So whether that's, treating others how you want to be treated, leading with your heart, speaking with intention, trying to use words that are positive and all those different things that I think usually are brought into religion as guiding principles.
mhm,
Um, to me, that is part of my own spiritual practice as well. I think nature can be a great teacher for that. I think a lot of things can. And I think body movement can be as well. And when I was getting ready to get on here, I actually thought of something that you told me when I was 18 that I still tell other people about to this day. I'm a doctor, and so my whole passion in life is health, and it always has been. Is trying to help others find health in their life, and feel empowered in their own health. And I remember when I was 18, we were standing outside of yoga teacher training class, about to go in,
mhm,
and I told you about something, and I remember you said to me, "But remember, your body is your temple." And that really sat with me, and it really hit home, and I've always thought about that. And I think that's so true in terms of with a spiritual practice too, is also seeing yourself as sacred, and what you put into your body is really important. And what you put out with your words are really important. And really using those kind of as guiding principles, I think is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm so glad that something I said was beneficial.
Yeah, no, it was. You were, like I said, when we reconnected, and I don't know the audience, but we've known each other for a long time, but we haven't talked in a really long time. And when I was 18 living in Austin, you were one of the main, I was young out there in that city by myself, and,
Yeah.
you definitely helped a lot. So, yeah.
Well, I won't take the credit for myself. I'll say that,
Yeah.
anything that's good comes from the divine, the one love.
You
The mistakes are all mine. So,
go.
so then, and then tell us more about the how you see the intersection of spirituality and nature, how that plays out for you in um, uh, your your life now, not just, you shared that very pivotal experience when you were young, but now as you're going for hikes on the weekends and, leading retreats and, bringing other people up to experience the mountains. And like, can you tell me more about how you see that in your present day life?
Yeah. So I live in the mountains, in a very small, quiet mountain town. And I love it. And I have easy access to many hiking trails and pathways. And and so similarly, I think um, there are some things many people can agree upon. And I think being outside and having it being a positive experience is one of them, in terms of it bringing people back together, where whether that's just kind of going back to all of our roots and more primal kind of, ancestry. But I mean, think about sitting around a campfire. Like I brought a group of women camping a few weekends ago, and there's something just innately, I think, in our DNA and our cells, that sitting around a campfire and having that is just something that builds community. And I think, the retreats are really powerful because um, typically, historically, I've led a lot of day retreats, and then this was my first one doing an overnight, and doing multiple day retreats or multiple day hikes. But when people are moving together as a group, working through things as a group, physically pushing themselves, and maybe outside their comfort zones, it definitely builds kind of that common ground and, like I said, community. I think that's
Mhm.
really important. And so I think that's a really one of the things I love about this podcast, like I mentioned to you, is that finding kind of more of the common threads
Yeah.
between all of us rather than focusing on differences. And so I
Yeah.
think when you strip people back going out on nature, or if you think about through hiking, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but if people hike the Appalachian Trail, which is where I live, in that area, it's a over 2,000-mile trail. They will go in one full stretch. It usually takes about 4 to 6 months. But on that journey, they don't typically go by their real names. They have a trail name. No one really cares what you did as, what you do for a living, because your life at that point is just putting one foot in front of the other. And from what I've heard, it's just transformative in terms of the experiences that you have with people, people that you probably may not have had conversations with before. You find that there's these just underlying, um, common threads, that can be woven. And so I think that's really powerful, and something that can be found, doing those types of things. Um, so, and then with nature itself, I was at a wilderness medicine conference a few weeks ago, and there's more research being done, with good evidence about forest bathing. Have you ever heard of forest bathing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Japan, they're doing some good research. I think Stanford's doing some too, but they're actually taking, samples of
Mm.
blood or serum from people, after being immersed out in nature, and seeing the differences in cortisol levels, and also, their NK cells, or, reducing the risk of cancer potentially. And so it's really great research. And I think there's something to that. And even the effect of putting a plant in your office, versus not having it, or a picture of nature in your office versus not. And they've seen differences even in terms of health benefits with having images of nature. So I think, again, going back to how our bodies are temple, is a temple and a sacred vessel, doing those things that promote health, I think are, something that's important as well.
Yeah. This may seem like a left field question, but one of the things that I think about in terms of the body as our temple is, of course, in my own tradition, there there's a lot of chanting, as and chanting is a practice that is found in many different traditions. You in your Kundalini
Yep.
yoga, obviously, even in Hatha yoga, in a lot of different practices chanting is a part of it. And in my tradition, it's not just about the meaning of a word
Mhm.
or the meaning of a sentence, or there's this idea that sacred language carries sound and a vibrational energy and a light.
Mhm.
Um, and so I wonder, do you experience your time in nature, do you think that there is a light or a vibrational energy or um, people talk about sound baths as not only just about forest bathing, but sound baths. So I wonder if you have any thoughts around sound and vibrational energy in relation to being in nature. Have you found that that's an important part of the process or the experience or
I'm going to cough for 1 second.
okay.
I'm getting over being sick, just so everyone knows. Um, so, and I'm going to take one sip of water. So I think so. I mean, I think things slow down a little bit,
Yeah.
with hiking. And I even think back to, so with Kundalini yoga, I would do something called breath walks. Have you ever done a breath walk or heard of that? So usually doing mudras, so hand movements, mantras that you're saying to yourself,
Yeah.
while walking. And it's honestly very similar to forest bathing in terms of trying to open up your senses and really becoming more aware. Um,
Mhm.
and, I think that it can happen a lot when you're just hiking, but sometimes when you're hiking, you're talking or you're doing other things. So you're not really focusing or really
Yeah.
getting to slow down. But
Yeah.
I think when that happens, when things kind of become more quiet, I hike a lot by myself. And I really enjoy hiking by myself, or with Sprout, my dog. But because I think that, yeah, the sounds become a little bit more crisp and clear. Your breath becomes a little bit, you can become more aware of your breath. Something like the wind or water, or I got caught in a storm where it downpoured on me for 2.5 hours. And then, for instance, seeing, nature, and how much it changed in those 2 hours, was incredible. But all those things, I think there is a vibration to that, and something, for me, slowing down is something that is, I guess, it's part of my spiritual practice, because for me, that's when I can start to tune in and listen.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that because you've mentioned slowing down a, a few times now.
Yeah.
And right before you said that last sentence about slowing down being central to your practice, I was like, oh, I wonder if what we experience in being in nature
Mhm.
is slowing down perhaps brings our energetic field more into a flow that is in accordance with a universal flow or a larger energetic flow of the created world as a whole, as opposed to just a physical body as it bumps up through our daily life against other physical bodies.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's part of that slowing down is there's an actual like instead of these two energy waves going like this, perhaps that it's the time in nature brings them into um, alignment. I don't know. I'm just
I mean, that makes sense to me. I think that's one common thing when I think about like religion, whether it's going to church, like I see church as something that's carved out time to slow down potentially or
Yeah.
sit, and stop doing, or if it's Sabbath or whatever it may be. I feel like that's something that is a you know commonality between a lot of different practices. And so I guess if someone is going in nature and that's their spiritual practice, it probably is a bit of the same idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that when we talked before this recording, I shared that part of the impetus for me in doing this podcast is this idea. It's more than an idea, it's actually an experience and an observation. So it's the experience and the observation and the idea all wrapped together that we human beings seem to be holding our religions with a great deal of narrowness.
Mhm.
Um, and in my estimation, and of course, who am I to say, but but it seems as if we human beings collectively need to participate in an awakening um, of our center, or the still center of the sacred self, of the true self, the higher self, whatever language you want to use in your tradition or no tradition. Um, and so, and I feel like people are experiencing that narrowness, whether it's in the church or in the mosque or the synagogue, that there's this way that we've been holding our religions narrowly is driving people away from where they have traditionally connected with enriching their spiritual lives.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's one of the things that I really appreciate about what you're doing is that you're regardless, I don't know what your intentions is for doing it, but it seems to me that what's happening is that it's opening a door for people to experience spirituality and experience the connection, experience the community, and experience the common ground that goes beyond our cultural identification or our individual identification or our religious identification and goes to what connects us, what is our our common sense of what we feel is meaningful and brings us into greater relationship with our deeper selves and in greater relationship with others in the created world. So so that said, um, what do you feel like is yours to do? What is it that you want to are wanting to and trying to contribute to the world?
Hmm. I would say the common thing has been, I mean, since in all the different facets of my life, has been trying to empower others to feel, um, or take ownership of their own health in their lives, in terms of, I feel like a lot of times, um, for instance, with the DIY doc and the whole retreats, that started out of a chapter in my life where I was rebuilding. And there was a sense, and I feel like a lot of times some females may feel this way. I'm sure everyone feels this way in some capacity, of waiting for someone else to make it, whether it's safe or okay to do something, whether it's buy a house or go hiking. And instead, I used it as an opportunity to show myself that I could do those things, you know,
Yeah,
and I had the tools to do it within myself. And so the same thing with health. I think, most of us know what we need to do. Sometimes there's just obstacles in how to execute it. And so something I've always wanted to do since I was young, and one of the reasons why I'm a doctor is because I wanted to create a space where I could help others find that within themselves. So I feel like I'll continue to kind of stay on that pathway. I
yeah,
would love to do more and more in wilderness and outdoors,
yeah,
because it is a passion, and I feel like our world has become less and less comfortable with the outdoors, and I think that it's a really, really important thing, to have incorporated in our health practices. So
Yeah. Yeah. I I really appreciate what you're saying about helping people take ownership of
Mhm.
of their own lives and their own health. Do you have any particular, like, if you were just going to say like one little sound bite or one little tidbit around helping people take ownership around self-responsibility, um, do you have any particular advice that comes to mind around how you would support people in that or encourage people with that?
Um, well, for one thing, I would say, it's hard to whittle down to one thing.
You would say your body is a temple.
Body is a temple.
Remember
Remember all
your body is your temple.
that. And I mean, I guess more so the one thing in terms of taking ownership is that I work when I talk to patients and people, I think our approach a lot of times to making changes is very much all or nothing. So it's I'm
Yeah.
gonna go on a crash diet and I'm never gonna eat chocolate again. All right, well, that's really not setting yourself up for success. So uh, and so I try to encourage people to celebrate the little wins and make small changes and sustainable
Yeah.
changes. This is actually something that I learned back when I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition for health coaching back when I was like 21. Um, because small sustainable changes, we usually do really well with momentum. And so once
Mhm.
we get one win, then our bodies more, or our people are more prone to then continue that and then use that momentum to do the next thing rather
Yeah.
than setting oneself up for failure and then you using that as leverage to kind of go down a negative mindset or cycle. So I think starting with something small, like thinking about like even hiking, and for myself, I mean, I started off doing, I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just going outside
Yeah.
and figuring it out. And then slowly I started to learn more and more and push myself more and more. And I remember thinking at one point, I thought, oh, 3 miles is a big hike. And I was really proud of that. And then now,
Yeah.
21 miles is an okay hike, so, um, and so I think,
Yeah.
yeah, but if I had started off by saying I was going to do 21 miles, I would have definitely not been able to do that, and probably hurt myself. And then that wouldn't have set myself up for, future success. So I would say, in terms of empowerment, celebrate the little wins, make small attainable goals, and usually the momentum will build from there.
Yeah. That's great advice. I think there's a great deal of wisdom in encouraging small incremental changes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm curious about is not that this is a not that we want to dive into what it's like to study spirituality in a doctoral program, but I can't help but remember in my graduate studies that one of the ways that we talked about understanding the spiritual formation process, and one of the ways that we engaged in trying to understand and explore and deepen our relationship or experience of spiritual practices was talking about these or these human capacities that every human has that come to play in relation to our spiritual practices. And those are things like action, attention, awareness, intention, imagination, meaning making, relationality. So I couldn't help but think about when you were talking about going on a hike and having people together and doing the first multi-day hike, like automatically you're generating some connections there. So there's some relationality that's coming. Um, if you're slowing down, there's a there there's likely to be a release, like there's likely to be a letting go of stuff as you're reshifting your physical energy into being more still and, as you said, more grounded. So I'm wondering, if I throw these words, and I know this is the first time that I'm throwing these out there, but like if you think about things like action, um, attention, intention, imagination, making meaning, relationality, like Do any of those particularly light up for you in terms of how you experience in your own body
Mhm.
spirituality?
I think you said connection was one of them, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of relationality. Yeah.
Yeah. So connection and intention would be the ones that kind of stick out for me.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I would say that that's definitely something that, at least for my own personal, spiritual path, it seems to be something that's, present.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would say in terms of on retreats, though, when you mention those words, I would say that different components of all of those are brought into play at different times. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, which I've never thought about or put in that context, but yeah, they're all there. So
All of it, all of the above.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we do exercises, and one of the exercises is again something that I did with when I was doing health coaching, which is with integrative health, and it's a circle of life or a wheel of life. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of those before, use that ever in health or any of your own practices, but there's different spokes to that wheel. And I do this exercise in every single retreat. And people that have come to all my retreats, they've done it every single time. And they know they're going to do it because it changes and it's fluid. But it's a really good way to take a bird's eye view of one's life or where they're at in that snapshot. And one of those spokes is spirituality. And so as we do the exercise and kind of put where our dots are or where we're feeling in terms of those components or pie shaped slices of our life and then connect them, it's kind of a eye-opening experience sometimes. Most circles are really just kind of splotches with areas that are more full than others.
Yeah.
But then it opens up really good conversations and around, where someone sees something that can have growth. And a lot of times it's with spiritual practice for myself. And the most recent retreat that we did, that's one of the areas that I wanted to focus on more and
Mhm.
put a little bit more intention in. And I know other people have had their own conversations around that on different retreats as well. And so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So, follow-up question is kind of connecting that with the question that I asked earlier, or the diatribe around the reason for the podcast and my own uh, ideas around wanting to open the door, so to speak, um, to awakening to the centrality of love and the centrality of our interconnectedness and the centrality of living with heartfulness as in juxtaposition to this narrowness that I feel like we humans sort of gravitate toward. And if we watch the news, I think there's a lot of examples of narrowness. We can see lots of narrowness. So do you, in particular, have any suggestions or anything for yourself that you do to encourage your own sense of heartfulness? I mean, I know that being a doctor, a family medicine doctor, even though regardless of what community you're in or what setting you're practicing medicine in, I think that there can be a lot of stuff that makes us really be in the mind or takes us out as opposed to in. So, do you have any particular practices that really resonate for you or really support you in living heartfully or approaching any part of your life, any aspect of your life heartfully and with that intention of a one love or a unifying love or an interconnectedness or interbeingness or however you might want to language that.
um, my job. So honestly, like I would say the one thing about in many and that's in many contexts. So one of the things that I love about being a doctor is that I have had the privilege of getting to know and sharing really intimate moments with people in terms of chapters of their lives, experiences that I otherwise would never know. And
Yeah.
um, and so daily I'm reminded of how grateful I am to get to know people on that level, and for them to trust me with that information. But also it reminds me how we are so similar because
Mm.
if I were walking down the street, we may never ever even meet eyes or connect. But in that context, in the exam room or the office, whatever it may be, in the hospital, all of that other stuff goes away, and you're just two humans having a conversation. And I think that's always a reminder to me, a, not to judge someone based off of all the extra stuff,
Yeah.
because usually at our core we all have the same goal. We have, most of the time have a very similar goal. And um and I'm also humbled every day in my job. And I think
Mm.
being humble is something that keeps the heart kind of, if things heart focused, because um,
Yeah.
for me, my biggest fear is, um, I don't know. I always want to be humble because if I ever feel a moment of excitement about something, I get scared. I'm like, nope, I need to stay humble, because the minute ego or anything like that comes into play, I know
Yeah.
that, I'm going to be reminded that I need to be humble. So I, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm always reminded of the things that I don't know, because there's always a lot that I have to learn and continue to learn. Medicine is always evolving, and it's an art. It's the art of medicine. It is a science, but there's an art to it.
Yeah.
And and then even with patients, I'm humbled. And so I think that keeps me, or I hope it keeps me honest, and it keeps me kind of living with my heart kind of at the center of things. So yeah, so I'd say my job is the primary thing that always reminds me that we are more similar than we are different. Uh,
Yeah.
and I have worked in all different communities, and I can say that that's the common thing that I found.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And what I also applaud that humility practice of reminding yourself to uh, when the ego starts to come up to say, hey,
Well, I don't like that feeling. It scares me because I'm like, nope, I know what's coming next.
no, 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 no. Yeah. Yeah. And in Sufism, you may or may not know this, but we have this idea that whether it's the mind or whether it's the ego, like that the way, the means of transformation or the path of spiritual development is through bringing the ego together with the light of the soul through the doorway of the heart.
Mhm.
That true intellect is bringing the mind together with the light of the soul through the doorway of the heart. And so you don't, if you're up in your ego and you're all proud of yourself and what you've done and what you're accomplished or whatever, then yeah, not so much. You're not necessarily operating with the beauty that is imbued, I would say, in each and every heart, with the light that's in every heart, and not necessarily bringing the light of the soul to your interaction. So I think it's just beautiful that you're embodying that heartfulness in your day-to-day interactions and your doctor-patient interactions.
I hope so. It's not, yeah, and I would say in healthcare right now, most people I would say would agree that we feel, burnt out a little bit, and it's
Yeah.
a challenging time. Um, and so there's moments when that burnout, I think, it shows, or I can feel it, and I feel it or I know it in my heart, or my mind and my thoughts. I can recognize it. And and then that will humble me too, in terms of a patient or interaction will remind me, um, that's what matters, is the patient. All the other stuff, yes, it's happening right now. I may be tired, or something might be aggravating with the healthcare system. But it all goes back to, why am I there? I'm there for the patient, and, to listen, and to work with them. Uh,
Mm.
so yeah, there's a lot of ways, but I think trying to stay humble, and also lead with my heart is something that I strive for, but I'm not perfect at it. I just strive for.
Well, intention, right? That's what
Yeah,
we
exactly.
mentioned earlier. Intention. That's 99.9% of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far, I just want to acknowledge what you said about burnout, because burnout, I'm not only I'm you know this, but I mean pervasive in the healthcare, but it's really pervasive across, I think probably in our culture today, across the board, people are experiencing more burnout more than ever. And it's Uh, the stats show it's higher in women than it is in men. It's higher in caring professions than it is, elsewhere. So I just want to say my plug for um, when we notice that we're burned out, that's like the reminder to engage in self-compassion.
Mhm.
Just to notice that we need to nurture ourselves, that we need to be compassionate with ourselves and care for ourselves so that we can be living from the heartfulness and the beauty and the light that is in each of us. Because if we're not naturally doing that, it's a sign that we need to do some self-care. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say, and that's for me on the weekends, my recharge is being outside and hiking.
yeah.
Usually by Sunday evening, I feel like a whole different person and I forget what happened, the week before, and I'm ready to start a new week and, feel like have a whole new leaf that it's been turned over. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So your recharge is hiking. You talked about the centrality of slowing down, the importance of what else did you say? I can't even read my own notes. I took great notes. I just can't read what they say.
Oh,
Just before we wrap up, any closing remarks around spiritual practice, what that looks like for you, any recommendations you have in terms for others in terms of spiritual practice?
well, I would say even if you don't have the language, trust that there is something that brings you back to a place of wholeness or fullness and whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Um, like I mentioned, for me, it's always been going outside or moving my body in some way. And then trusting yourself, trusting that your body is very intelligent and very smart. And usually, when we slow down, it will tell us what we need. We just have to listen to it. And setting yourself up for success by making small, sustainable changes to help build on momentum and create some empowerment. And um, and then just remember that we are more similar than we are different, and that we work better as a community than as separate individuals most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dana, it's been a delight to connect with you after so many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. May all goodness continue to unfold for your heart and bringing you what is most meaningful to you in every way. So, with that, thank you to all listeners for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go, if you would just take one breath, just take one breath to return to the still center and reflect for a moment on anything that might stay with you from this conversation with Dr. Dana. May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light in your own heart. May you grow in compassion and clarity and courage. May you find your way home again and again, back home to yourself, back home to the divine, back home to the light and the beauty within your own heart, however you name or describe or believe or don't believe in your tradition or no tradition. If today's conversation spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it. So please leave a review, like, share, reach out. Until next time, may you be light. May you carry your light. May you consciously participate in growing your light. And may you share your light. Peace be with you.